We set up camp just before sunset, deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. It was me, my girlfriend Leah, and her brother, Mark. The plan was simple, just a weekend away, surrounded by nature. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest transformed, shadows stretching and deepening until the trees became towering black silhouettes. By the time the fire was crackling, the only light came from the flames and the pale moon above. The woods were eerily quiet. Too quiet. No owls hooting, no crickets chirping. It was the kind of silence that feels like it's hiding something. Mark tried to lighten the mood, telling a story about a supposed woodsman who haunted this area. A twisted figure who lured campers away and left nothing but their gear behind. Leah rolled her eyes, but I couldn't shake the chill that crawled up my spine. "All right, I'm grabbing some more firewood," Mark said after his story, standing and grabbing a flashlight. "Don't go too far," Leah warned, but he just waved her off with a smirk. Minutes ticked by, then half an hour. Leah and I sat in uncomfortable silence, the fire popping occasionally. Finally, she frowned. "He's taking too long." I grabbed my flashlight. "I'll go check. Stay here." The beam from my flashlight cut through the dense dark, illuminating branches and leaves that seemed to close in around me as I walked. "Mark," I called, my voice sounding small and out of place in the vast emptiness. No response. I followed the faint trail, the crunch of leaves under my boots the only sound. After what felt like forever, I spotted something. Mark's flashlight, lying on the ground, still on. My heart sank. "Mark?" I called again, louder this time, but the woods swallowed my voice. As I bent down to pick up the flashlight, I noticed something else. Footprints. They weren't marks. They were huge, almost claw-like, leading deeper into the forest. Against my better judgment, I followed them, my breaths shallow and quick. The trail led to a clearing, and there, in the middle, stood Mark. At least, I thought it was him. His back was to me, his stance stiff and unnatural. "Mark?" I whispered. Slowly, he turned to face me. My stomach twisted. His eyes were wide, unblinking, his mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. His clothes were torn, his skin pale, and his arms hung at his sides, too long, the joints all wrong. "Run!" he said in a voice that wasn't his. It was deep, guttural, almost like a growl. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and sprinted back to camp, the sounds of snapping branches and heavy footsteps chasing me. When I burst into the clearing, Leah was gone. The tent was ripped to shreds, the fire smoldering. I didn't stop running until I reached the car, and when I drove away, I swore I could see Mark, or whatever he'd become, standing at the edge of the woods, watching me leave. The forest seemed peaceful when we first arrived. My two friends, Jake and Sam, and I had spent the day hiking through miles of unmarked trails. By the time we set up camp, the sun had dipped below the treetops, leaving streaks of orange and purple in the sky. We were miles from civilization, surrounded by nothing but trees, silence, and the promise of adventure. After dinner, the fire cast a warm glow over the clearing, crackling softly as we traded stories. Sam was mid-sentence when he froze, his eyes fixed on something beyond the firelight. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Jake and I shook our heads. "Hear what?" Jake asked. Sam didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared into the dark woods, his face pale. It sounded like, someone laughing. We fell silent, straining to hear. A few seconds later, I caught it too. A faint, high-pitched giggle, so soft it could have been the wind. But it wasn't. The sound was deliberate, chilling in its unnaturalness. Jake tried to brush it off. "Probably an animal," he said, though his voice betrayed his unease. Sam wasn't convinced, and neither was I. The laughter came again, closer this time, echoing faintly around us. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded human. "Let's check it out," Jake said, grabbing his flashlight. "No way," Sam said, his voice tight. "We should stay here." I was torn, but my curiosity got the better of me. "I'll go with Jake. Stay by the fire, Sam." We stepped into the woods, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air felt colder away from the fire, and every step seemed to echo too loudly. The giggling stopped as soon as we left the campsite, replaced by an eerie silence that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "See anything?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, scanning the dense trees. Then I saw it, a figure, just barely visible in the shadows. It was small, hunched over, and its head tilted at an odd angle. "Hey!" Jake called out, shining the light directly on it. The figure flinched, scuttling backward like a spider, its movements jerky and unnatural. "What the?" Jake started. But the figure let out a shriek, a sound so sharp and piercing it made my ears ring. It darted into the darkness, faster than anything human. "Run!" I gasped, grabbing Jake's arm. We sprinted back to the campsite, hearts pounding. When we got there, the fire was out. Sam was gone. His chair lay on its side, his flashlight still on the ground, flickering weakly. Then we heard it again, the laughter. Only now, it was everywhere, circling us in the dark. We didn't pack. We didn't look back. We ran, leaving everything behind, and didn't stop until we reached the car. Sam was never found. To this day, I still hear that laughter in my nightmares. Camping at night had always been my escape from the chaos of life, a place where I could leave the world behind and let the stars keep me company. That night I had chosen a secluded spot near a lake, miles from the nearest town. It was perfect, silent, untouched, and eerie in the way that only the wilderness can be. The fire crackled as I cooked a simple dinner. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their shadows dancing across my tent. I felt a strange calmness, a quiet that I welcomed after weeks of stress. But then, the calm began to feel heavy, as if the forest were holding its breath. I first noticed it when the sounds stopped. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. Then I heard the sound. A soft crunch of footsteps behind me. "Hello?" I called, turning toward the darkness. My flashlight cut through the trees, revealing nothing but branches and shadows. I felt a prickle of unease, but laughed at myself. "Probably just an animal," I muttered, trying to sound braver than I felt. I sat back down, feeding the fire more wood, but my sense of safety was gone. My ears strained for any noise, and soon enough, I heard it again. A deliberate, steady crunch, closer this time. I grabbed my flashlight and stood, my heart pounding. "If someone's there, I'm armed," I lied, my voice shaking. The beam of light swept the trees, and that's when I saw it, a figure, half hidden behind a trunk, staring at me. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. No response. I stepped closer, and that's when the figure stepped out from behind the tree. Its limbs were wrong. Too long, too thin, bending unnaturally. The face. It didn't have one, just a smooth, blank surface where features should be. I stumbled backward, tripping over a log, and scrambled to my feet. The figure tilted its head, as if curious, and then began moving toward me, its steps slow and deliberate. I didn't wait to see what it wanted. I ran to my tent, grabbed my keys, and bolted to my car. As I sped down the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. It was standing in the middle of the road, its head tilted again, watching me leave. I never went back to that spot, or camping at all.